There's a man named Roger Lear. He's a doctor who a doctor of podiatry, lives in Los Angeles, and he has specialized in removing implants from people. Now, the implants that he removes are not in normal areas where we see implants. In other words, the most common areas are through the nasal passage and then up near the pituitary gland, we think, or into the ear, through the eardrum, and placed somewhere, we're not sure where, in the skull. And then through a tear duct and into a sinus cavity. You'll see that from time to time as well. But he removes what he thinks are implants from arms and legs and feet, and then he has a team of surgeons who work with him as well, because who do the surgery, who do most of the surgical procedures. And he's come up with some very, very interesting things, and that can be evidence if you prove, in fact, that it's of extraterrestrial origin. That is a very tough thing to do, very difficult to do. For me, the most important thing to do is to take this, whatever it is that they remove, and show, if it is an implant, show what the implant does. Is this what is its function? If you can figure out what its function is, then you go a long way towards saying that this is a true oddity. Because this, let's just say, measures hormonal levels. It's just a little object that well, I don't think we have anything like that in the medical community. And if they can show that this object does that, and it comes from an abductee who had it in his or her arm or stomach or whatever, that person, has had abduction experiences, well, then you'd have something important. And I think that Dr. Lear is close to doing something like that. I hope he's close to doing something like that. But he has amassed a considerable number of odd and unusual property pieces of things, or whole things in themselves, that are suggestive, to say the least. They're very suggestive, and so I have high hopes for this coming through. Any implant, any piece of object found in a person immediately goes into debate. Everything in the universe is made up of the same elements. Therefore, if the question is for an implant is, could it have been made on Earth? The answer is almost always yes. And so it always goes into debate. But what you have to then have is a number of these with the same kinds of properties. And then the evidence begins to get bigger and bigger, and it grows and grows, and then you'll have something like that. It's a long shot, but it is a shot. So we're hopeful.
Now, what about, you talked about, you believed that these aliens were harvesting eggs and sperm from people. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, this was discovered early on, and in fact, the interesting thing about this is that in the earliest accounts of abduction that we know of, that were not the contactees of the 1950s in the United States and the UK and other countries, who primarily were charlatans who claimed that they were taken on rides in flying saucers and taken to the moon and Mars and Venus and Neptune and so forth. Aside from that, where you have legitimate people who are not charlatans, were the 1957 Antonio Villas-Boas case in Brazil, And then the 1961 Barney and Betty Hill case in the United States. These were the two earliest ones that were uncovered. Barney and Betty Hill were an upstanding couple in their community, did not try to make money off of the phenomenon like charlatans did with their fake stories. Antonio Villas-Boas at first thought to be an illiterate Brazilian peasant, and then after he became an attorney, we realized he was a student, and his father was a well-to-do rancher. But both these people, all three of these people were abducted. And the interesting thing about them is that they all had something in common. For Antonio Villas-Boas, he was required to have sexual congress, shall we say, with a weird-looking alien who looked sort of human and sort of not human. Barney Hill had sperm taken from him, and Betty had a needle in the navel procedure, which she interpreted as a pregnancy test. She said that's what they told her. That probably is not what they told her, but that is how she interpreted it and thought that that's what they told her, because we know what that procedure is now. We have many cases of that, and we know what it's for. It's an egg-taking, one of the several egg-taking procedures that they have. And consequently, reproduction, interest in reproduction, sperm, egg, that sort of stuff, was from the very beginning, from our first knowledge, from day one of our knowledge of the abduction phenomenon, was present. For no reason whatsoever. If a person is going to say they're going to be abducted, they don't go on to say, well, they were forced to have sexual relations with an alien. Why would you say something like that? I mean, it's crazy enough as it is, you know. And so, but that is constant. And that is constant all the way through to the present day. That is something that all abductees go through, all of them. Now, the question then is, well, how can I say the word all in this situation? Supposing a guy has a vasectomy. They're still producing sperm, they still take it. They just do it in a different procedure, involving a needle. And supposing a woman has a hysterectomy and also has her oophorectomy, her ova are removed. Her ovaries are removed, I'm sorry. What happens then? Well, the problem here is that the abduction phenomenon goes from infancy into old age. It is intergenerational, and it happens with great frequency from all through the course of a person's life. So beforehand, that woman had eggs harvested from her over and over again, starting when she was a child, usually maybe 9, 10, 11. They'll go directly into the ovaries and remove follicles, as opposed to removing ova as they're released from the ovary. So, it happens to everybody. My colleague Bud Hopkins discovered in the early 1980s that people were then taken and required to hold weird-looking babies that sort of look like ugly babies, as they described them, crosses between human and alien, and they were required to feed them and to eventually see them as toddlers and play with them, and then eventually see them as young kids and instruct them and teach them how to do this and teach them how to do that, and hug them and hold them and touch them. And it turns out to be quite important. And then over the years, we see these as adolescents and as young adults, and then as adults, and then not as older adults, for reasons we don't know. In other words, we don't see 80-year-old as my colleague Von Hopkins said, call them hybrids. We don't see 80-year-old hybrids or 70-year-old hybrids or really even 60-year-old hybrids. There might be many reasons for that, but people don't report that. But they do report them in the 40s and even older than in their 40s. So what we're looking at here then is the production of hybrids. They're taking sperm, they're taking eggs, they're putting them together, they're making some sort of alteration in the fertilized zygote or gamete or whatever it is. They're altering that fertilized egg. They're either injecting alien DNA, if there is such a thing as alien DNA, and I don't know if there is, or they're doing something else to create this human alien style being. So essentially, that's what's happening. The reasons for all this are another story altogether, but it's something that does happen with great regularity to all abductees. I wish I could say no. I wish I could say that this is not happening, because to even discuss this aspect of the abduction phenomenon takes credence away from it. Because you immediately go to sexual events, you know what I mean, sexually or reproductive events, and it adds to the oddity of it and to the ridicule involved with it. It sounds so human-centered, but we have to deal with this. People understand immediately that this is happening. People understand that they're talking about something that is embarrassing to them, that they don't want to talk about. They don't want this to happen. Everybody discusses it. Everybody says it. As an anecdote, I dealt with a woman who had these experiences, but she didn't. We had like 3 or 4 sessions together, and then we had a bunch later. This is how it works in a way. I know what happens before they take eggs. There's certain procedures that happen before they take an egg, and I know, here it comes. They may not even know this. They're not going to. They may be remembering this for the first time, but I've got to prepare them for. I've got to say the right thing at this right time when they say A, B, C, and I say, oh, good grief, here comes D, and so some people just go right to E. They just skip right by it. So this happened several times with this one woman. So finally I said to her, well, sometimes when this being is staring into her eyes, and I won't go too much into it, but basically controlling her emotional response, and which we can talk about later if you want to know how this works, and this emotional response ultimately has a sexual aspect to it. And you have to remember, this is a bug-eyed monster staring into a woman's face, and this is not the time for sexual feelings. But it's artificially induced, and it goes up to peak sexual response, at which point they take an egg. So she was skipped by this, and I said, well, sometimes when a person is staring at you like this and you miss it, they can sort of bring out different emotional ideas and different emotional feelings. And sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's love, sometimes it might be sexual, sometimes it's a whole. And I went on with my list of things. That was just one of them, just whatever.